All right, we are back. Happy Thursday, everybody. Hey, Tonya. Hey, Natasha.
Hello.
Hello, hello, hello.
So this is another episode of Listen to Black Women where it's been a day, but we're going to talk about some things related to law policy, Black women culture, and innovation. We have with us today Natasha Scruggs, Esquire. We brought another Black woman lawyer into the fold, y'all, and we are just so
We need some backup.
Natasha
We need some backup this week.
Yes.
Child, we need all the prayer and supplication and everything else we can get for today. So let me introduce Natasha. Natasha, we'll talk to you for a little while about what's going on in the world, especially as it relates to this hyper focus and just like what's the word I'm looking for? Hyper scrutinization of Black women in sports right now. So I learned about Natasha relatively recently. We were just talking about it earlier. It was in like April or May. She posted this video on Twitter. This was right after Ma'Khia Bryant was killed in Ohio, as the verdict was being read for the policeman who murdered George Floyd. And Natasha posted, it was a series of videos about Ma'Khia Bryant and about Black children in foster care and the violence that they experienced. And I started following her then. I learned about her firm and about her podcast and the work that she does with professional athletes and with helping more kids get interested in law school. So Natasha, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Also, a member of the NPHC. We got 3 of the Divine 9 represented here today. Natasha is a member of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated. And also, in addition to all the things she does, is the host of a podcast about Black women athletes, particularly the WNBA and social justice. So this is going to be good today. Tonya, how are you?
I'm doing well. This has been a really interesting week because it has been like a really long week and a really short week. And there's 17 different things going on. It feels like every day, each one is important. And 5 of them weren't on your schedule. At least I'll just speak for myself. And so all of the things on my schedule are getting elbows. It's like going hard in the paint and getting knocked out. Because I feel like I've been knocked around a bit, but the business is going really well. I'm excited to get started on some final planning for a short course cohort that I'm going to be doing at the end of the summer. So gearing up for that. Looking forward to my next vacation. I know I just got back, whatever, don't drag me, it's fine. But that keeps me going. I don't know about the rest of you.
Oh yeah, I have to, every time I do a vacation, I'm like fired up for the next thing. So yeah.
Exactly.
Listen, wait, hold on, Natasha. So I can't go any further. I saw something you posted on Twitter. It was like a green, I don't know if it was a bikini or like a leopard print situation. So are you on vacation right now?
No, that was
timing her out.
I took a bunch of pictures when I went to Miami 2 weeks ago, and I'm just like posting them, filtering them out. So I'm definitely not on vacay, but I can't wait to go back.
I love a good photo dump. I'm about to do that too. I love a good photo dump. So I might do that too. And you got to keep people guessing. I don't need people to know where I am. By the time I come back, then I let people, it's like, oh, she's on vacation. No, I was on vacation 3 weeks ago, but that was none of your business.
Yes.
I hear. I love your pictures, Natasha. You living your life. I love it. I haven't been to Miami in a while, so I need to put that on my list of places to get back to. So, Natasha, how are you? Before we jump in, how's everything going with you?
You know, it's definitely been a day. Like she said, it's been a week. It's been so many different things going on professionally, not, just like when I see stuff going on, like injustices, it makes me upset. So, of course, as Black women attorneys, we don't show that in court, or we don't show that when we're talking to the prosecutors. But I am in court every day. I do have to, endure, discrimination on behalf of my clients every day. So not only professionally, but then personally, And like you mentioned, my podcast, I was actually about to have a Black woman come on my podcast, somebody who I've done panels with before on this show called The Grapevine. And I also have purchased her book, or not a book. She has like a program called Women Love Power. And she unexpectedly died last Friday, and we didn't find out until this week. So that was a big deal. She's only 30 years old. And then,
oh my goodness.
and also today is like the 13th anniversary of my uncle being killed by the police when I was 17. So it's just that type of week. It's like up and down, and I need to keep pushing. Let's keep going. Okay, maybe I need to rest. Maybe I need to inspire. It's just that type of week. So
I think we probably need to talk about that too. First of all, let's pause and take a breath. We need a healing breath in this moment for everything that you just shared. Needs some space. And we're even more grateful that you would join us here, and a bit of an impromptu, because Shantavia, I'll speak for myself, but I suspect my sister in spirit and power also knows about I'm just going to keep pressing. Literally the walls are falling in on me, but I'm going to keep pressing because that's what I do. And that press looks impressive to everyone who's looking at us, and we're slowly dying inside, trying to hold up the positive and strong front. So I want to acknowledge what you have shared, and to know that this might turn into some type of sister cipher where we are just lifting each other up and giving each other flowers in space, because too often we don't do that for ourselves. So I just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that it also plays into this conversation, because the things that Black women do, the things that Black women go through outside of their profession or their sport or whatever the case may be, it doesn't get any, nobody looks at it. They don't get any room. They don't get any grace, anything like that. So all of this stuff that's going on that we're going to talk about with Black women, that's on top of their personal lives and all of the things that goes into being Black.
100%.
So I just felt like a wave of something, because this is so true. I mean, the reason I even wanted to have this conversation, I'm looking at all these Black women who are dealing with all the things they're dealing with in their lives, and the way we just keep moving. So I was in therapy this week. I have a Black woman therapist, and she told me, this was yesterday, that you deserve rest. And that's the first time anybody's ever said to me, look, sis, you deserve rest. It's not just that you need it. You deserve to have it, because you're always going. So I appreciate you, Tonya, for that. And Natasha, thank you for sharing our condolences for all the different things that are happening. I think I saw something about this yesterday about your friend that you mentioned, and I was just so heartbroken. There's so much happening in our world right now. We really do have to hold space for each other. We really do. So thank you both for just like having a little woosah moment. And
Absolutely.
in this regard, I'm sorry, Tonya, go ahead.
No, just I was giving you an ashe and an amen. And if I had my wine in time, if I was 5 minutes earlier, I'd have my wine as well, and I'd pour a little out and then the rest for me. But I digress.
So, hey, I mean, we're going to need it after this, I'm sure. So as we have this conversation about Black women and the way in which Black women in sports in particular have been scrutinized, we were talking earlier about how the headlines are taxing, they're draining, they make us feel a certain way. I've seen at least 6 or 7 different things in the media over the past couple of weeks about Black women just literally not being given any grace and any space. And the Olympics are about to happen in Tokyo. It seems like Black women are under significant scrutiny, specifically Black women going to the Olympics or not going to the Olympics this year. So I want to start there, if we can, with what's happening with Black women participating or not participating in the Olympics. We all fell in love with Sha'Carri Richardson when she won the Olympic trials. What was that, a couple of weeks ago? And it seemed like a lot of the world turned their backs on her last week when we found out she failed a marijuana test. And the thing about this story with Sha'Carri Richardson just looking at her and thinking about what you just shared, Natasha, and you, Tonya, is this is a 21-year-old, she's a woman, but a very young woman who was competing in the Olympic trials and finds out from a reporter that her mother dies. And then still has to go out and perform. And not only does she perform, but she breaks records. And we're celebrating and doing all these things. And this young woman just found out from a reporter that her mother died. And so I know you both are former athletes. Tonya, you played professional tennis. Natasha, well, I don't know what sport you played, Natasha.
Basketball.
But how do you basketball? Okay, that was one of my sports, girl, 30 years ago. But as we think about what's happening, not just with Sha'Carri Richardson, and we can talk about some of the other Black women and the things they're going through too. How do you process this story, and how do you process what's happening with her right now?
I can go first. Well, a lot of people see people who are athletes and they kind of look at them in a vacuum. But whatever that athlete comes from, whether it's what city they come from, what school they come from, what family they come from, what economic level they come from, what advantages they had, what disadvantages they had, all of that comes into play when it comes to their acceptability into the sport. So Sha'Carri is a round the way girl, a regular Black woman, 21 years old. She works on her craft every day. She's dedicated. I saw on Instagram in 2017 where she said, I'm going to be at the Tokyo Olympics in 2021. So she worked towards this for years and years and years. But as we said earlier, life still goes on. So she has to deal with poverty. She has to deal with whatever issues, familial issues. I heard that she was raised by her grandmother. I don't want to speculate on what happened to her mother, but I know how these things can be working in all of these systems that we have and all of these issues that are going on. She didn't come from a silver spoon, put it like that. So when she goes out there and beats a record, and she did it flawlessly and effortlessly, and she was far in front of everybody else, and she would have definitely won both of her races at the Olympics. When they turn around and give her a blanket statement by saying, hey, because you did this, we're automatically going to suspend you 30 days. I think that's absolutely false. That's absolutely wrong. And I wish that she would have had representation. I don't think she has representation, because even when she did the interview afterwards, she was in her room and she didn't have anybody next to her. She should have had a friend next to her. So I think that if she would have had representation, she wouldn't have went online or went in public admitting to what happened. I think that it should have been more of a process. They should have looked at the totality of the circumstances and looked at her as a whole, as opposed to just looking at her taking this one drug test.
No, I completely agree. Completely. There's so many ways to unpack, and I didn't spend a ton of time in the Twitterverse arguing with people. I'm not going back and forth with people about this topic, because it's not just about Sha'Carri in isolation, because Sha'Carri is really all of us. And that is very fortuitous the way we started our conversation for this moment. Because what I immediately think of, and Natasha, to your point, we're expected to follow all of the rules without having all of the requisite privilege. And this idea of the totality of the circumstances is critically important. The way that this punishment consequence is meted out could have been done in a way, okay, if there's going to be a 1-month suspension, perhaps after the Olympics, or in some other way, given the extenuating circumstances. We all know that there are, we have the black letter law, and then we have equitable considerations. That law that sounds in equity instead of the law. We see what the black letter says. We see the four corners of the statute. We're going to go outside of it because of these extenuating circumstances. And I heard the thoughts and prayers and all of that, this has altered this individual's life and the rippling effects. It is further compounding what we know in our respective workplaces of what this looks like. She unfortunately has it on an international stage. And I was just so concerned for her and the the impact that this has on her at the cellular level, when you think about the damage that this does to you continually, to have the, the, the rules and have them being meted out, but not having the same circumstances. No, all things are not equal. The playing field is clearly not level, and we see it in plain sight.
And it's so interesting, Natasha, you mentioned that she obviously doesn't have a team, or it seems like she doesn't have a team. I was reading this article by a sports journalist about Michael Phelps and about the team he had around him that protected him so many times from exactly this situation. So there are a couple of instances where he got caught with a bong, or he was inebriated, or this or that, and he did get suspended for some things. But there are so many instances where he broke the rules, but his team protected him and created this environment where maybe he wasn't tested when he should have been, or when the rules were where they interpreted the rules in a way so that he could compete, or he could race, or this or that. And this is the same thing we see all the time with the law, where, yeah, we have things on paper that look to be colorblind, but we know they're not. And we know that even though, to your point, Tonya, the rules say what they say, they are not meted out equally at all.
Sorry. But finish your point. I wanted to make the point about how often Serena is tested in my sport, and documented. Yes, again, we have the rules, but wanting to try and catch Serena in this very predicament by testing over and over and over, because this super strength and super power, right? The super professional, she's just excellent, but they wanted to catch her. And there is documentation, I think it's a couple of years back, she didn't even realize that no other player in the sport was tested as much as she was. So you can't tell me that it's random, and then also she's the most tested, and then that's random when so few of us actually play at that elite level.
Yeah, and I don't know anything at all about the Olympic policy and how their federation is run and all that, but it seems like so often these things that we read about and the ways in which their policy is created, they often negatively impact Black women more than anybody else. Like we see what happens with these two Namibian sprinters, Beatrice Masalingi and Christine Maba, who apparently were born with higher levels of testosterone, and they get tested when they win their races, and now they are no longer allowed to compete in certain races. I think in any races, one of them can't compete at all because of the way she's naturally born. And so I'm just completely annoyed with so many things that are happening with Black women in the Olympics right now.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to the testing, so it's different aspects when it comes to Sha'Carri Richardson. So they tested her based on marijuana, THC. It is in the Olympics policy, in their council policy, that you can't have that. Where I think that they had a discretion is the length and the severity of the punishment. So I think that they could have, like I said, looked at the totality, looked at them as mitigating circumstances, and given her a shorter suspension, because they knew that if she got suspended on that day, she would not make the July 27th race. Now, she did. After that 30 days, she would have been able to make the 4x100, but now the U.S. decided not to pick her for the team because of that. So I think that if they would have looked at that and kind of figured out something else, figured out something that would have warranted that type of, or figured out a quote unquote penalty that would have been warranted, that would have been better. And then when it comes to the other women who happen to have higher testosterone, this goes back to people telling women what women should be. I'm sorry, I keep coughing. So people keep telling women what a woman is supposed to be. Women are supposed to be this. Women are supposed to be that. A man decided what level of testosterone a woman is supposed to have, and that's false. These are women, And then another thing, the people that are making these rules and laws, they don't even understand biology. They don't understand that sometimes people could have, it's no limit to what a woman can have, but that still makes, she's still a woman.
You know, so I love that you brought this up because I know people tend to look at Americans and say that we see things through such a narrow lens when we're talking about so many different things. We talk about things the way we see them in the US. But what this shows to me, whether it's who is a woman, what kind of swim cap you can wear, because there's certain swim caps now that are banned, but for that are for like naturally curly or thick hair, or when you can race and this and that and the third. What I see is that misogyny, racism, misogynoir in particular, all of these things are international problems. This is not something that is distinctly American. And there are just so many things where, you know, we're told, well, the law is colorblind or the law is clear or this, that, or the third. When we know, whether it's in the US or around the world, we do not have the same consequences. We often have more significant, more stringent consequences than everybody else. And so, Tonya, I know, like you mentioned, you even experienced something like this in college when you were a college athlete and the ways in which, you know, certain women athletes were treated.
Uh, uh, Probably Black and brown people generally, and it could have. I wish I'd had those statistics from way back in the day of how it might have disproportionately impacted Black women. I had formed an association at Northwestern. I attended Northwestern on a full tennis scholarship, and it was around this same idea of testing. And I, in isolation, I didn't have necessarily a problem with testing, and I wasn't as proficient with the ban on all substances. And you really did have to be quite careful. There could be something that was in a supplement that had nothing to do with illegal drugs or anything like that and still get tripped up. What I had a problem with was that it wasn't everyone who was receiving a scholarship at Northwestern. And the acronym was Say No. So it was Student Athletes Against Northwestern Oppression, Say No. If you're going to test everyone, then test everyone. Test everyone that has a scholarship because they're receiving money and whatever the rules were, not just athletes, most of whom were Black. And I had a huge problem with that. I don't know if we had a tremendous amount of traction, but there were a sufficient number of people that could not explain why it was only athletes and not others who were on full rides or partial rides for other things that were non-athlete related. And so this hyper focus on those who excel, you want us to perform, you want us to represent you, but in a way that is still focused on be great, but not too great. And we're going to tell you what those parameters are, and you step outside of that, and there will be consequences.
So, I mean, we're all lawyers. We're sitting here, we're having this conversation. We know that law policies drafted, to your point, Natasha, oftentimes by people who do not look like us at all. What can, particularly Black women in sports, what can women do? Or what are your thoughts about just the way you navigate these spaces? Natasha, you said something so important earlier about having representation, having people who know how to navigate these things. We know the Olympic rules are notoriously confusing and confounding to the point you made earlier. So what suggestions would you give Black women in sports, particularly Black athletes who have to navigate these types of things their whole career?
I think that I always have said this, even before now college athletes can have representation. I've always said that athletes should have representation from college, from the time they're 18 years old on up. And honestly, the way that these grade schools, middle schools, and high schools are going, they may need to have them earlier than that. I believe that in any case where you're accused of something, you should immediately get representation, because anything you say can and will be used against you, just like it is in the court of law. We're dealing with very sensitive topics. Like if it was the government doing it, it would have been a Fourth Amendment, issue. So we're dealing with stuff where people don't understand how invasive a drug test is. So we're dealing with a lot of different things with that, as well as, so they need to have representation, but also they need to maybe get some sort of briefing on what exactly they can and cannot do. But also, I think that these councils or these people that make these decisions, they need to be held accountable, and they need to be scrutinized a little bit for their decisions. I mean, they just blanketly made a decision. We took it personally. They knew who was going to take it personally. They knew who was going to hurt. We all wanted to see her run. That would have been amazing, but it's not happening. I do think that it was several, times in that period that maybe an argument could have been made, but it's too late now. So it's kind of like, it's the same thing that I tell my clients when, they encounter the police. It's hard to talk about stuff like that because lay people don't understand the connections between all of that stuff. But it's also connected to the legalization of marijuana and the fact that, she was in a state that has legalized marijuana. But I always talk about how legalization isn't enough. We need equity, and we need a reconciliation, and then we need legalization. They jumped to legalization to earn money when they knew that we were going to be the ones suffering from legalization and criminalization from all of it.
Ooh, you said a mouthful here. So you posted, I think it was you, Natasha, you posted this picture a couple of days ago on your Twitter feed of the Jackson County, I think, Circuit Court. And then there's a medical marijuana dispensary owned and operated by a white male. And you talked about how you were representing your clients in this courtroom on weed charges, marijuana charges, when this white guy right next door to the courthouse is selling medical marijuana. And it just don't make sense. Like, how we say all the time, make it make sense. Like, there's no way
exactly
to reconcile a lot of these things.
Yes. Yeah, it's ridiculous, and it's so funny because the white owner and the workers all were upset at me, and I'm like, first of all, nobody polices my page. That's number one.
First of all,
yeah.
And when a Black woman says "first of all," it is very serious. Continue. First, I hope you do like this. First of all.
Number two, I wasn't even like coming at y'all. I was talking about how the system is wrong, and you got your feelings hurt, and you got white tears and white guilt, and you brought it to my DMs. They sent one of their Black women employees to my DM. Then they sent somebody else, and then the owner finally came in, and he said, "I'm the white male that owns the From the Earth dispensary."
Wow.
And then he tried to talk like, I do all of this to the community, all of this entitlement, and my way goes, and I'm right, and I want to get patted on the back. And I'm like, this is not about you, but you're proving my point that white men, he's 24 years old. He owns 5 different dispensaries in Black areas in Kansas City, Missouri. And he opened them up like the day that it was legal. I'm like,
wow.
What are you're the epitome of white supremacy. Like, your company is only here on the backs of other people. So I know, from being an attorney, from being a Black woman attorney, how marijuana is very, very political. And so I knew as soon as they said she violated that, or she quote unquote failed a drug test. We don't even know the numbers. It's so many different things. But as soon as they said she violated, the drug test, I knew what was about to come out. I knew all of the the propaganda and all of the media about to just swarm her. And I wasn't ready for it. And that's why I put that out, because I was like, yeah, I need to understand what's going on. It's bigger than just, oh, that girl shouldn't have did that.
Every time somebody brought that up as, well, she knew the rules. If somebody's like, okay, first of all, to your point, take that to your page, because I'm pretty sure I didn't invite you here, and you can go back where you came from. You don't want this smoke. No pun intended, right? So take that somewhere else. But the entitlement, the unmitigated gall, and when I also, if I were going to get into a back and forth with this person I don't even know, the countless times, and I went to a private, so let me take even a step back, going to a private elite high school and middle school and lower school here in Philadelphia, and all of the parties, and all of the people, and all of the elites, and the children of the elites who had these crazy parties. You'd sleep over, you'd be in the pool, they'd buy a half a keg, there's drugs in one room, somebody's kissing in another room, and everybody goes out to be a Supreme Court justice, right? And there's no problem with that. That they get very ticky-tacky when it talks about the rules as they are policing Black bodies. You mentioned, Shantavia, that Sha'Carri is 21, and we think about the decisions that are made there, particularly without protection. But there's a lot of judgy people, and the misogynoir that you mentioned earlier was very disappointing to me around this point too, because many of these conversations happened in Black spaces, in addition to the hyper privilege that was turning the hyper privilege of being very judgmental in this space about what somebody should or shouldn't do. We all know about rule following. We all know about following the laws and the rules. We're lawyers. That is a separate and distinct issue from the higher level questions that we're talking about, and the systems in place to ensure our policing, and the costs to not only her life but a generation of lives as well, because of the rippling effects.
Ooh, and so speaking of judgment, so you mentioned the word judgment. There was other stuff happening in the news too around Black women in sports, involving a number of people, including, for example, Maria Taylor, who has a white female colleague who was suggesting in a private conversation that was accidentally recorded, suggesting that Maria Taylor only got certain opportunities at her employer, ESPN, because she was a Black woman. And so was you talking about like how people get really judgmental when they're looking particularly at Black women doing the work and being better than everybody else? How do you think all this plays? So you mentioned misogynoir, which we talked about a moment ago, but how does all this sit when we look at Black women just out here doing the damn thing, being at the top of all their games? What did y'all think about this particular thing with Maria Taylor and Rachel Nichols?
I always find it amazing when, first of all, when the protections of, when I think of like Title IX, when you think of all of those protections, most of the time people are focused on more white women. No other group of people has benefited from those types of protections than white women. And so once people say, oh yeah, we're diverse, we checked all the boxes and it's 50% women and 50% men. And then you look and most of them are white women. And she can't even see in that moment how she has benefited, I assure you, without knowing either one of them, far more from the protections of anti-discriminatory policies than anyone. And the idea of clearly we were raised to be twice as good for half as much. And I feel like it's 3 for a third. My math is not so great, but you know, the fact that these conversations go on in private and you can have whatever private thoughts that you want, but it's disingenuous to not realize and affirm that white women have benefited more when we talk about diversity policies and equity policies.
I think, first of all, it was ridiculous. The whole thing was ridiculous. It was her camera that she or whoever
that part.
That's right.
I taped myself on purpose. Wait, what?
Yeah, you recorded that. You sat there and lied. My thing is, if your employer comes to you and tells you that they don't want you to host, the first thing you did was blame somebody else. She didn't do any self-reflection and say, maybe I need to get my hosting game up. Maybe I need to be better. She didn't even think, she didn't even self-reflect at all. It immediately went to, and guess who that's going to help. And the other thing, when she even said that, it seemed like she didn't have the biggest problem being a sideline reporter, even though she wanted to host. But she was like, over my dead body, will I be a sideline reporter and let her get a host? And she was the one that brought up race. She was the one that differentiated being a quote unquote female. Like she said, I know that from the female side, as if Maria Taylor is not a woman, and said, well, her on the Black. She was the one that differentiated between her and Maria Taylor, saying that Maria Taylor's only there because she's Black. It's complete BS. She knows that ESPN did not go on the street and grab the first Black woman that they saw and put her on TV. Black women on television is a political stance. They don't. It's not a lot of people with brown skin on TV, and everybody knows that. So she's very entitled. And another thing, I hate the way that her and Adam talked about the Black Lives Matter movement, talked about Me Too, talked about diversity in general. Diversity is supposed to be righting a wrong. So it's like she's just ignorant. Like ESPN having Black people on there is not doing the Black people a favor. Black people are doing ESPN a favor.
Right.
Rhea Taylor is not getting handouts. That's not happening, and she knows that. So I think that she needs to, and her apology was absolutely ridiculous. If I was Maria Taylor and I was there, I would have completely rejected it because it was 20 seconds. It was a blanket apology. She did not list out everything that she did wrong, nor did she say how she will work to get these racist ideals out of her system, to get these paradigms that a Black woman is here because of the handout out of her system.
Another thing about this apology, which burned me on the inside, she talked less than the two Black dudes on the show with her. Kenny Perkins, I don't even remember who the other guy. They did more talking about her and how wonderful she was than her apology. And that just showed me how disingenuous it was, because I didn't even watch the whole thing. I only saw clips of it because I was so disgusted by like the way the whole thing went down. And to your point about Adam, just like, oh, they're so exhausted with all this talk about Black Lives Matter and about Me Too and about women. And how do you think we feel dealing with it every day? If they just heard about it for the past, 12, 24 months, whatever, how do they think we feel living it every day? So I was just completely annoyed by this whole thing, but it brings to light what we deal with in the workplace in a way where, whether you're an Olympic athlete or you're a sports journalist or wherever you sit in the microcosm, there are just so many things that we have to navigate, some with legal ramifications. Workplace discrimination is a thing. Hostile work environments are a thing, or if you are an athlete.
Sorry, you're not talking about me.
We can do a whole dissertation. We can do a whole dissertation. I know we all could, about all the different things you have to navigate and how you can not only survive in those environments, but like Maria Taylor, like I know Sha'Carri Richardson is going to do, like all of the women we've talked about, how you thrive in these environments. And I think it goes back to one of the things Natasha mentioned, which is you have to have a good team of people, whether they are lawyers or your prayer corner or your friends, your colleagues, whatever. You have to have a team of people who can help you navigate not just the emotional stuff, but also your legal recourses and all the other things that you need to be thinking about when stuff like this happens. And I think Maria Taylor has handled it, at least what we can see publicly, she's handled it beautifully. And I loved how she got to introduce Rachel Nichols' replacement the other day.
Amazing.
During the final.
Yeah.
It was
Go ahead, Natasha. I cut somebody off earlier.
Oh, no,
Natasha.
I was just saying she has a team. That's what it looks like when you have a team.
That's right.
She's not on social media tweeting, and Rachel could. That's not what she's doing. And I think that official statements and things like that, she has a team. She has publicists. She has a lawyer. She has an agent. She has a team, and that's what other people need. But I think that our Black athletes need to know that they have access, and in order to have that access, there's going to have to be some money, which will be the equity that we're talking about, poured into these professionals to help these athletes, because these Black athletes don't have the funds to have a team, but they deserve a team, especially somebody like Sha'Carri, who became who had international eyes on her in one day.
Right. It makes me think of Simone Biles and what she's doing to reach back. It makes me think of the others. When I was coming up, and even the reason that I chose Northwestern was because of Katrina Adams. She was competing there. I remember our recruiting trip, and I'll never let her forget it, even though she's been amazing to me for my whole life. The day I signed, probably was like the day after, a day or two after, she decided she was going to go pro, and she was leaving Northwestern. And so I was like, wait, I thought we were going to get the band back together. But throughout her life, she and I think Zena Garrison's a little bit older than me, Lori McNeil, those are the people I grew up admiring and then getting to work out with. We shared a coach, and it was that nurturing that always kept me within. I have a great deal of privilege in my life as well. And even yet, and still with mother's a lawyer, father's a doctor, but they really were the first to do the things that they did. So when you're the first or only at anything, even in 2021, even with some level of financial privilege or educational privilege, we still go through, but think about the absence of even those things in the way that we can go back to community and network so that we're raising our own to protect the excellence, because that could be thwarted in an instant, as we've seen.
I like what you said about nurturing, because besides a team, she didn't even have the opportunity to have nurturing because we're still in the pandemic. So even, women who have been to the Olympics and things like that, she would have been able to at least have some sort of sisterhood and people to help her in that way. Like, she was really just left out there, which is a sad thing to see, for a 20-year-old. I have a 21-year-old little sister that I still basically take care of. Like,
exactly.
They're in college, but they're very, young.
Man, so can we wrap it up this way? Because y'all are dropping some. I need to be taking with some people I know who will be in this position probably. But when you are a Black woman in sports, you're a Black woman with a ton of potential. Who do you need around you? So Tonya, you mentioned having a team of professionals, people in the sport. Natasha, you mentioned having a lawyer, a publicist. Who are the other people that we think these folks need to have around them?
You want to have those folks who will help you second guess your choices in the moment. So the friend circle where you're all going in the same direction is really, really important as well. And that doesn't mean that everybody's going to be an elite athlete. But I can think of being in places and circumstances where it's like, 10 o'clock, I think is great. I think we need to leave now because nothing good happens after 10. The reminder of it, that constant influence. And I also, when you think about the friend circle, and this happens a lot, both in entertainment and sport, where if you hanging out with people who have less to lose than you always needs to be reevaluated. I think of that personally in relationship and the choices that I make. And I certainly would think about that professionally. So really starting to take a second look of if someone has a way less to lose and are not invested in my success in a positive way, then they need to. We see a lot of people either fall off when someone is elevating, or you see the vultures come around when everybody's rolling with a posse deep with 20 people all eating off of the same star, and they end up being yes people. So that's a danger, and really identifying the people who are going to rock with you in a way that is affirming your next move forward rather than back.
I agree.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. So just last point, Natasha, you say, I think in your bio, that you are a social justice advisor for professional athletes. Why is that so important? I mean, we know why, but can you explain why athletes need to have someone like you on their team too?
Yeah, I think like me, I've been studying the criminal justice system for over 12 years just in school, but I've been looking into it before that. And not only that, my education, my experience, and my expertise. I saw last year when the Milwaukee Bucks, one of the players said, "We're not going to play." Somebody had just got killed by the police. Everybody, all Black people in America were frustrated, and they said they didn't want to play. Immediately, the powers that be began convincing them that they need to go out there and play. So they said, "We're going to boycott." At first they said, "We don't want to talk to the press." Then somehow the press finagled their way and they talked to them. And if you see the video, the men are stressed. They're young and they have a piece of paper. They're reading it off. They know what they want to say. And I saw this happen with Colin Kaepernick in 2016, where the media will really try to take advantage of these men and gaslight them like their concerns aren't valid. And so I saw then they talked to a few people and then they were playing the next day with nothing changed and they're upset. So I was thinking, what if they had an advisor at a time like that where they could talk to me and they could tell me all of their concerns and I would give them the legal reasons why their concerns are right and the talking points so that people can't sway them from what they say that they want. So I'm not giving them what I think they should do. I'm listening to what they believe in, depending on where they're from, what city they're in, whatever the case may be, and I'm giving them advice. And this is a free service I offer to pro athletes. The only time when they would need to make some sort of payment or something is if they wanted me to implement a program in their respective cities. But it's something I'm really proud of. And I know that once I get bigger names, because athletes are still scared to even talk about this stuff. And that's why I'm trying to give them the legal terms so that I'm not being radical. I'm not being a troublemaker. I'm telling you legally, this is wrong. And and I'm against that.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Natasha, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a lot of fun. I learned a lot about this whole time that we're living in as it relates to Black women in sports and how we can help our sisters navigate as people who have a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of education about this stuff. So we appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Tonya, you want to say anything before we close it out?
Before we get out of here, a lot of watch this again. So you're here and watch again, and please share with your friends. We are here live at 5 every Thursday. You need to listen to Black women, and Natasha M. Scruggs is one of the reasons why.
So Tonya, I'm not Tonya, sorry. Natasha, tell us where we can listen to you. Where can people find you online? How can people listen to your podcast and all the stuff?
Oh, yeah. Follow me on social media, Natasha M. Scruggs on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I just tried to make my name universal. Then you can click the link in my bio. You can also Google and search a lot of the different articles about me. And on YouTube, it's Natasha M. Scruggs as well. So you can see some things I've been doing from 2015 until now on YouTube.
Love it. Love it. All right, y'all. Join us next Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to listen to Black women. We love you, and we'll see you next week.